confidential? Should we be able to use the data in a confidential space? I don't know, but our very much an amazing panelist here will answer this question. And we're gonna start with a round of intro. And please, guys, introduce yourself. And in one sentence, you will be able to shield your project during the panel. Don't worry. But in one sentence, please, present yourself and your project.
So hello everyone, I'm Philip, one of the co-founders of SpaceComputer. And as a part of my background, I have been working in distributed computing for the last couple of years, working on TEs for some time and also in general security. And as a part of SpaceComputer, I'm responsible for leading the tech with respect to the vision we have. And the vision is hopefully ambitious as we see it. And this is to provide a new architecture for confidential computing running on satellites in space. Whereas of now, we have identified what confidential computing should look like in space. And we have a couple of satellites in the pipeline at the end of this year and beginning of next year that will be proving our solution running in the space as well. So definitely exciting year ahead of us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us, first of all. It was a wonderful location and wonderful event. I am Mike Massari. I am Chief Strategic Advisor and Head of Atom and Credora at Redstone. Redstone is the fastest growing blockchain oracle in the space, so very much a data company in a way. Our job is to provide price data and now much, much more to different chains in a timely and reliable manner.
Hi everyone, my name is Nino Kutnjak. I'm a product lead at Oasis. Oasis is an OG in the TE confidential compute space. Now with the recent move, we're changing also slightly the direction into more user-facing products, and this is my primary role at Oasis right now.
Hi, I'm also Philip, so it's going to be a bit of a confusion here. Chief Product Officer at Flare. Flare is a blockchain that started by bringing deterministic and probabilistic data to an EVM blockchain, specifically to connect to non-EVM sources, XRP Ledger, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Algorand. And we're slowly evolving this connectivity not only from blockchain side, but also by bringing additional power, in this case privacy, in this case being able to access much more computing power. So NTEs obviously are spot on for this task.
Great, thanks. If in the audience, if you are not agree with something, like just wave your hand and you can get the mic and explain why you are not agree if it's relevant, please. So let's go straight to the point, and in my panel topics there is data, but what kind of data we are talking about? And I'm talking about beyond the classic data in DeFi, beyond the classic balance, transaction. What kind of data in DeFi space we should care about? And feel free to grab the mic whenever you want. There is no order, it's totally random.
All right, I'll take a stab at this. Oh, thank you. Volume up. Love that. Please do interrupt. Actually, I love that about panels. So it's interesting, right? Because we started years ago for the OG people in the room. DeFi data was mostly price data. That is our baseline, right? And we always care about, BTC USD price or any sort of like token pair price. As we called it, we learned to call it Oracle data. Now there's much more. And now with lending protocols getting more and more into DeFi, a lot of curators are opening vaults, are opening markets. There's a lot of assets they are tokenizing on chain. You have, as an investor, whether it's a retail investor or an institutional investor, the need, but also in a way, the responsibility of seeing more data. And we're talking about, for example, return of investment data. We're talking about risk data a lot, which is becoming a bigger and bigger topic in the space, but also a bit more about the underlying data of where this price comes from, what is the custody, what is the liquidity distribution, where is stored the liquidity. So there's much, much more need, an increasing need of different types of data. personally, I do think that the Oracle role, it becomes very important, even more important than it was in the future, because you still are bound to the same reliability and security and speed constraints and requirements. But also now you need to cover a much bigger surface of type of data, but also precision of data. And you get into a bit more of an arbitrary data interpretation. So one thing that we're trying to do is to remove the arbitrary component from it. We are bringing, for example, standardized risk rating on vault assets and markets across the DeFi and also to an extent TradFi ecosystem. But the data problem is always something that has been particularly important, but I think that nowadays it's much, much more important than it used to be, especially because of these institutions moving to chain, especially because of the need to be more compliant, more precise, and more timely.
Great answer. Any of you want to add something?
Yeah, maybe just to continue on this Oracle discussion. So from my perspective, the data is kind of crucial component to what the blockchain provides. So the blockchain started as a nice way to compute something. It was mostly a computational, an execution thing. And data is the next step in saying, okay, so I have a computer, it can compute, but where's your hard drive? So what are you doing? There's no pictures on it. There's no documents. There's only a program that can do some mathematical operations and you're done with it. So from this perspective, data on blockchain, I wouldn't say it's only limited to this numerical data, but it really allows you to leverage the computational power, leverage whatever is the process after doing something on this data, and this gives you power. So from my perspective, the crucial point is going to be having a bunch of models, or at least some inferences being done on large data sets that you can then use in your computation. So yeah, be it risk models, be it, I don't know, lending credit to somebody, be it also able to settle on something, but I think it's crucial to stop thinking about blockchain and data as kind of separate components, because computation without data points is, I don't know, it's running in isolation, which was the initial thing that blockchain did, but it's quickly becoming apparent that institutions are not, it's obviously institutions, but you can't do anything really useful in the real world if you don't have.
Okay.
That's okay.
It was too long. It was too long. It's why. I'm kidding. No, go on if you want to continue.
But yeah, so I really think that this is the missing component, so that you can do the execution properly and you can have the sense of this execution and at least assign meaning to the final number.
You talked about. Oh, you wanna get the mic? Yeah.
Fully agree. I think also the other aspect that we start to see more, one part is to also have proper access to the data, and I think on that part we also see that something we would like to contribute as well is to have a proper authorization and access to basically who can use the data for what type of purposes, and definitely cryptography TEs can definitely help with that, to have right policies and right way to actually handle the access to the data and use it for your solutions building on top of that. So I think this is the other part, that currently everything is a little bit too transparent, but we see there's also like interesting information to have the right signals that can be only used for particular applications, and I think TEs or other solutions can definitely help a lot in that as a next step for the usage of the data on chain.
We talked about. You talked about confidential execution, computation. You talked about TE. I hope you watched the presentation of iExec, Oasis, Flare, talking about this confidential computing space. It's in the title, data and confidential execution. We know with TEE, we can compute data, any kind of data, in a confidential space, but what about the other privacy technology? Because there is not only TE, even if it's the best privacy technology ever. Sorry, I'm working for iExec. No. But there is ZK, FHE, MPC, and what role these technologies, the other privacy technology, could do in this DeFi space?
Yeah, I think there are multiple technological options, but I would say it's just different means to the same end, right? We're looking for some sort of confidentiality. We're looking for auditable confidentiality, where you can show that rules are actually working, which essentially means this is confidentiality with some sort of selective transparency. And regardless of which path you choose, there is definitely a discussion worth having whether we still have to trust a certain part of this technology to work. And I think right now in confidential sector, regardless of which path you choose, there is always some sort of compromise there. So, my 2 cents.
Yeah, maybe I think it's mostly which compromise are you taking and which things are you willing to sacrifice and how exactly are you guarding that the things that you sacrifice are properly taken care of. So I'm a mathematician, I really like ZK. It's amazing, it's the closest thing you kind of get to magic. The fact is that it does get limiting at some point, so there's only some computation you can do with it. You can do summation, some multiplication, and then things get a bit complicated. If you want to do this properly and divide, it gets a bit fuzzy. So the TEs, at least from my side, are this nice balance between high performance, knowing where your problems are and how you can address them, and also the ability to have configurable things and to put in arbitrary code. So we really want to say, okay, so you don't have to invent a whole new thing to come here. Take your program, put it on, and we're giving you a sufficient amount of assurances, and that's usually enough for you. Obviously, other technologies have very important spaces. You want to have a full assurance and very quick checking, there's ZK for you. And it's very good for that specific thing. But if we really want to go broad sense, from our perspective, TEs offer this nice balance and the ability to know what you have to protect. And obviously, there's drawbacks.
I fully agree. I think the other part is, I think, very interesting, especially if you look at ZK or TEs. I think this is unfortunate, but oftentimes they run in a single environment, in a single place. And of course, eventually, if you start to consider decentralization and have ways on how others can also contribute and participate in it, you definitely start to look into solutions like secure multi-party computation to provide availability across the whole system, and then it becomes like an interesting compositions of all of these building blocks together. But of course, you have to also find and compromise on the security and throughput of the overall systems, because these technologies are still not as performant as we would like it, but definitely interesting, I think, areas for research and extension of the systems we have, like as of now, to provide interesting properties to the user as well. I mean, example is like threshold cryptography together with TEs for private keys protection. I think it's definitely one of the examples, but we can scale it to general purpose compute with SMC. Just again, it's going to be the trade-off of the throughput of the system we are designing for, and the use cases built on top of that.
This question is not in the list. Sorry, guys, surprise. Yeah, I'm just curious. Are you using yourself privacy platform, privacy tools when you are using DeFi? Like, maybe? Personally. Yeah, personally. Like, there is, I think, a difference, a different vision of privacy from retail to institution. And, in my opinion, retail people, like simple one like me, it's not that they don't care about privacy, but it's not the primary problem they need. An institution, it is. But in your weekly, daily use of DeFi, are you using tools if it's not confidential? And these tools, what they solve? Why you are using it? What do you want to hide?
I'll answer the second part of your question, which I think is particularly interesting, which is more than are you using tools or which tools are you using, what is the difference between, the privacy requirement or privacy profile of a retail investor and the privacy requirement and privacy profile of an institutional investor. I think that this is a very interesting topic. Yes, I do use some privacy tools, but obviously the requirement that I have as a nobody retail investor is not nearly as strict and is not nearly as prescriptive as the requirement that an institutional investor has. And I think it comes from the fact that I invest my money, first of all, and I don't have any sort of people that give me money to reinvest. And therefore, the disclosures that I have and the risk profile that I'm exposed to, it's a very personal risk profile, and it's a very personal, privacy profile. And obviously different people have different appetites for this. I know people in my daily life, friends, not in crypto, but acting like in real life people that never touch a blockchain in their life, they don't use Amazon because it's not private enough, right? Or people that don't use Google because it's not private enough. These individual people. There are, when you go to institutions, certain constraints where there are certain protocols that you can use because they've been approved, they're privacy compliant, and there are certain others that you cannot. So I think that the exposure comes from the regulatory compliance that you are subject to, the individual institutional privacy profile, but also the fact that the responsibility is much, much higher when it comes to investing money that is not yours and being exposed or exposing data that is not yours. In Europe, we have GDPR compliance when it comes to privacy for personal data. I do not think that this will be very far away from some sort of implementation of data compliance that we will have on chain at some point in certain protocols. So KYB and KYC compliance is already there, and that usually imposes a different privacy profile than a retail investor can afford to or be exposed to.
Yeah, so when it comes to usage of privacy protocols, etc., there are some use cases where it totally makes sense. I would say that mostly I utilize anonymity layer more, so generating new wallets, losing certain trace, etc., than private execution in itself. But what I'm thinking is, with the emergence of regulated stablecoins and looking slightly into the future and saying we're going to have apps that run on stablecoins very similar to neobanking, are we really meeting the minimum that is already available in the neobanking, right? So if I send $10 to my wife over a neobank, this transaction is not publicly visible, while on chain this same stablecoin transaction would be visible. So I see that this could be a potential problem when retail starts to kick in. There are already cases out there where a transaction or a specific wallet is connected to the individual. Even addresses have come out, or users self-exposed themselves with NFTs, etc. So maybe I'm backpedaling a little bit, but even public ledger can be problematic in this case.
I don't know if I have to look over my shoulder. Yeah. I don't know if I have to look over my shoulder, but yeah, I do use privacy tools personally.
Which one?
Oh,
like everybody is using privacy tools, but no name. No, I'm kidding.
No,
it's
I've used mixers in the past. I've tried a bunch of interesting stuff, so to speak. One thing I have to, for example, be careful about is I need to make sure that my private wallet and my public company wallet are very clearly unconnected, because A, I want to play around with stuff, and B, I want to have one that's always there for company purposes to see how things are going, and I regularly create new ones just to see what's happening here and there, and I have to be really careful to make sure that they're not connected between each other, because otherwise they're going to see, oh, that guy is playing around with this new stuff, okay, that's going to be interesting in a few days or hours or so. Maybe one important thing, but that's getting away from the question. The privacy and anonymity is like, it's very nice to have, but the thing is that you leave so much traces on-chain and off-chain that it's very difficult to stay like this forever. But at the same time, it's also very difficult to then prove, as in prove to some regulator or to bank at the end if you want to withdraw, that you really indeed have not done something specifically malicious on chain, because at the end you're proving this to a lawyer. You're not proving this to somebody who's trying to believe you. Yeah, I've seen there are 10 transactions, none of them are touching anything suspicious. No, you're proving this to somebody who has, I wouldn't say they have an incentive to not believe you, but they're just not that agreeable with you by saying, yeah, that's fine. So it's a very different world, because on one side you have to be very, very careful to not be somewhat unanonymized, and on the second side you have to be very careful to stay very public, very compliant. But yeah, it's blockchain, so it started via protocols that give you additional power.
Cool, great. Please don't hate me. It's another question that is not in the list. It's total freestyle. Like, we all going in the right direction talking about privacy. We are all working and are to integrate privacy in our protocol, in our project, with selective disclosure for to be compliant. And I feel we are moving forward, but with AI, I feel like we are going back, because AI, it's, in my opinion, a big risk talking about data. There is plenty of new projects like use AI agent to trade, to stuff, to risk management, to whatever, and there is new attacks like prompt injection and things like that. And it's feel like AI will break all what we've done working hard for this privacy. What do you think? What are you thinking about this AI, not trend, because it's right there now?
I think with AI coming, actually many of the technologies we are nowadays building will become even more relevant with respect to that, because more and more stuff are being generated from AI. Like either if you look at fake videos, fake photos, you name it, definitely our solutions with respect to privacy enhancing technologies can help in that, to at least provide provenance and auditability to the users actually that are consuming the information, that actually this is like something originally coming from particular device, particular user, and it can actually provide additional verifiability and trust to the user. Because if you look at it, so many fake information are flying out there. It doesn't mean that our privacy and our technology can fight fully fake news, but at least can provide the visibility and transparency to the users that will get more confidence. But at the same time, I think what is interesting that AI is accelerating in some way as we speak all the time, and people are of course jumping on it because you don't want to miss the train with respect to the technology that is out there, and it makes our lives in many aspects easier. And we of course are becoming sloppy here and there, that as we have seen, even Claude has made some mistakes, not due to AI partially, but they disclose all of their sensitive information even without just wanting. It was just like a sloppiness. So this is the part where I think providing good guidelines that are enforced and are verifiable will actually likely become into place also on the infrastructure layer, which kind of gives me hope that the solutions we are building can be providing the fundamental layer of verifiability actually that can kind of contain AI within certain bounds for a user to gain more confidence in the systems you want to build.
Interesting, the age-old arm wrestle between privacy and transparency. To me, I agree completely with what you said. I think the new attack vectors are always created by every technical evolution. Right? This is something that happened since the beginning of technology, and in a way, creating new attack vector also pushes the industry to create new safety measures. So overall, I do think it's a net positive. And we're probably now in a phase in which, yes, there is less potentially traceability, right? Or there is more doubt around whether or not something is authentic. And there is most likely, in certain way, the only way that there is to prove that it is to compromise on privacy on some level, right? And to provide, as you said, more transparency. I do think that, and I am confident that technology will solve this problem in the same way that, for example, some time ago, ZK solved, as you mentioned, a problem of, private computation in a way, and private verification. So there will be something, I don't know exactly what it will be. I think it will be speculative to talk about, what AI will look like in 5 years. But I do think that overall, the AI movement is a positive one, and we're now probably in the peak of the annoyance when it comes to the privacy side of things, but it will subside over time.
Yeah, so my thoughts are that I think it's probably time that we start talking about what role AI will play and how do we give it access, right? So if the difference between centralized exchanges and DeFi is KYC, maybe we need to start introducing some sort of role model or some path of how AI enters the DeFi in order to protect our data integrity, right? So we can't just pretend that image generation with AI has the same level of access than when it's entering DeFi. So we need to start to distinguish in the both and really work on protecting our data integrity on that side.
Well, to move back to the question, so AI and what does it mean for privacy, or what does it mean for privacy, however we want to call it. I really like the new technologies always introduce new attack vectors idea, because it's a fact. Agents make a lot of things easier, but they also publish so much metadata around it that you can collect those breadcrumbs and just see what's happening. But I think that pretty much at the end falls under the new attack vectors also guarantee new guardrails that you need to put in. And let's say specifically on a very plastic example. So if you have a private order book sitting somewhere, no one who cares about their privacy, and we're talking about big players who care about this in a different way. So it's not just caring because to know what's happening. It's in my financial interest to not let other funds know that I have placed an order such and such. You know that by adding a new tool to your toolbox, you also need to add a new safety gear to the same toolbox. So you would make sure that, yes, if I'm using an agent, this is the metadata I'm leaking. How do I make sure that I'm using a channel where this metadata is irrelevant, for example? And I think that it's going to be very, very clear and quite easy to make sure that you use those tools in a specific set. So you're never going to be a big fund using Claude to, okay, generate 10 transactions for me and I'm just going to sign them with MetaMask at the same time where I'm going to add additional breadcrumbs that you would add in a normal DeFi interaction anyway. So I think, yeah, new tools, new gloves.
Yeah, true. Thanks. Let's go back on track and talk about confidential computation. Are we replacing the trust in the protocol? Are we moving the trust to the hardware and the math? Like how you can unfold this trust? Because using TE, I need to trust the TE, but what can I do to help this trust? It's a complex one.
Well, I mean, we've always trusted math in a sense that we trust that this private public key derivation is correct. So that's kind of the essence of what blockchain is. And obviously the latest Google quantum paper pretty much says, okay, we'll have to be a bit more careful on this side. But I think that moving this into a TE, or at least a specific part into a TE, just gives you a bit more things you have to be careful about. Just says, okay, so are you willing to offload a specific amount of trust to the TE manufacturer, the data center where this is running in, and so on. And like I said, new tools, new gloves, you really have to be very careful to properly address these risk issues and to properly quantify them and to just know where your risk assumptions lie. So in the cases of, let's say, again, ordinary blockchain, you know that this elliptic curve multiplication shall hold under certain conditions. In this case, you're getting much more power, a bit more security, a bit more privacy, but you also have to be aware that there are some holes that might leak. And as long as you are aware of them, as a protocol developer, as a user, as somebody who's doing due diligence, you just need to make sure that you're not missing stuff, and you always have to be on top of things. So we'll have to adapt to quantum computers anyway. We'll have to adapt to Chainalysis being better and better and tracking and making us a bit less private. But things are never static. That's the fun part about the industry. So yeah, it's better, but obviously you have to be sure what you're getting into.
Yeah, so thinking about this immediately brings up the idea of staking and financial guarantees, right? So we have this point where there is potential single point of failure, and we want to be able to address it and say, like in typical business, this and this can go wrong. It is calculable. It is calculable from what you are actually risking, and introducing some sort of staking, financial guarantees into the relationship can definitely boost the adoption.
I definitely agree that I think math is way easier in some way to trust because it's verifiable, but I think we are oftentimes losing the binding between the math and the actual implementation, right? Like how many soundness bugs are currently in ZK that is something that actually is something that's to be solved. And of course, TE as a concept, I think is great on paper in many parts, but of course we see that translation from the theory to practice is struggling. But of course, the fundamental building blocks is based on cryptography as well. It's based on math. Like, if you look at its public key cryptography all the way to building up the trust, and then it's like up to the manufacturer on how they choose to implement it. Is it in a transparent fashion? Is it obfuscated? And hopefully, I think that this is the good push that I see a lot from the industry. There's a discussion on how can we mitigate the root of trust in some of these solutions and make it better. At the same time, we also see push on the ZK side, for example, to make the math verifiable in much more solutions using different type of approaches. And I think overall there'll be an interesting mix where you can make things open, transparent for verifiability, and later on use it in a more trust minimized fashion. And there are, I think, many advances in the recent approaches using formal verification that are focusing not only on the specification, but also, for example, having a formal verification of the minimal root of trust assumptions we have, for example, also in the hardware or the implementation of the particular firmware that is like really providing us the trust assumptions we have. So I think on that part, there is an interesting synergetic work that I think is like really providing more robust and secure systems as we move forward. And even though it's of course unfortunate for TEs, oftentimes we find bugs, but I think also we see that the manufacturers are learning from that and are trying to open source more and more of the components. So maybe people get to see and actually also trust in the adoption of the technology along the way as well. So I think it's hopeful future, TLDR.
Cool, great. A few more questions and after the alcohol will be served. Please be patient. The world is crazy. Okay. The Web3 is evolving so fast. I would like, could you please, because we talk about data, confidential computing, computation, let's talk about DeFi. I would like two stories. The worst case scenario in DeFi in the coming year, 5, 10 years, and the best case scenario in the coming years.
Every panel that I ever do, there's always this wild speculatory question that makes me look like a fool because I give a wild prediction of what's going to happen in blockchain in 5 years' time. I've been doing this for years. Turns out I was wrong a lot. So take this with a big pinch of salt. I don't think that, 3, 4, 5 years ago, nobody would have thought that institutional push was going to be so important on chain. Everyone was talking about speed. Everyone was talking about block times. Right? And now something completely different happened that I think a lot of us did not predict. I definitely didn't. So to me, the best case scenario, given what we're seeing now, is that we remove the term DeFi. As in, now we have traditional finance and then we have decentralized finance. To me, the best case scenario is that we just have finance in a number of years. Maybe not 5 years, maybe less. Where DeFi and TradFi become intertwined to the point where we're just talking about finance. And we're not making that distinction anymore, where we see all of the values and all of the assurances and all the trust minimization that we brought to DeFi, all the reason why DeFi or blockchain were born, being applied across the spectrum and across the board to a number of traditional finance, what we call now traditional finance products or traditional finance use cases. The worst case scenario, I think, will be to compromise on those things too much and lose the essence of what we created with such difficulty and with such time.
Are we already losing this essence, like currently, with the compliance, with everything?
I think we're maturing as an industry. I think that there are certain things that traditional finance does very well, and they work, and they provably work, and DeFi is getting closer. I don't think that evolving means being on your own position forever and just like accept that stuff comes to you and closer to you and to your way of thinking. I think that evolving and to go to this finance of the future, there needs to be compromise. So there needs to be things that go from DeFi more towards TradFi and vice versa. I don't think that we're losing the essence of it. I do think that traditional finance world is adapting a lot to what is our way of thinking and to what our methodologies are. So I do think that, no, we're not at the stage yet. And hopefully we will never be. But that will be, to me, the worst case scenario where DeFi just becomes TradFi and it disappears by losing the essence of why it was created to begin with.
Yeah, just to add on top on the question, are we losing the essence? I think it's a discussion of compromise, right? So if we want to play in the world globally and be plugged in, we need to understand that the risk appetite is different across the people, right? So again, looking back at neobanking, it was supposedly, like a fast-moving space inside finance, but essentially what they brought is instant transactions and maybe, an easier access to some of the other financial instruments. But generally, it's a very slow-moving space because when it comes to general public, they do not like to take risks when it comes to finances, which means DeFi has to adapt to their appetite. We cannot say, come to DeFi space, and yes, it's very risky, one click and you lose it all, which means regulation. So whether this is losing the essence or not, I think the question is whether we are all aligned on the same goal, and that's adoption. If we are, well then yes, we will lose part of the essence in exchange to match the risk appetite of others.
Maybe a bit controversial, but basically the best case scenario I think would be that we no longer talk about blockchain, right, with respect to the technology, but rather focus on the features it provides. And in that sense, like, it will be just one of the underlying rails for the financial systems, but we will no longer be selling its own blockchain, but we'll be selling, we can do borderless payments without many friction, and kind of see how the mass adoption can be unlocked through that. But hopefully what will be the worst case scenario is that we'll be losing the features of blockchain, which for me, especially with respect to finance, is accessibility. Currently anyone can go open a wallet wherever they are and try to access the solutions out there. And hopefully this will not be lost in the process, that you can open a wallet unless you do KYC, KYB, but you still should have the opportunity to basically enter the financial inclusion with respect to the features the Rails should be providing in the future. So this is, I think, the worst and best case scenario from my point of view.
Well, talking about the best and worst cases, there's always an additional question: to whom? So yeah, but let's not go that deep. I think blockchain is no longer just a solution in search of a problem. I think the problems that we're solving are very clear, and the problems have been addressed quite nicely. So from my perspective, best case, and actually the scenario that we're going towards, is this nice merger, where certain aspects that were 10 years ago deemed impossible are pretty much taken as a granted because the technology is where it is. So I usually have this example where it shouldn't take me 3 days to send money to somebody because it's Friday and the computers are sleeping over the weekend. And obviously this is a solved thing, and even European banks have started to see that, yes, obviously the money has to move faster. So I think this merger amalgamation, where technologies that we're exploring were solutions that were pretty much required and necessary, are just going to get into the mainstream because they're crucial, because they allow us to live much better, be more efficient, and so on. And best and worst cases, I think, maybe controversial, that at some point the industry as such overextends itself. So we're building stuff quickly, we're doing yet another thing, looping, we're exploring this and that, and then we see a hack happening pretty much every weekend. And I think this is one of the main hurdles, because every time you say, look, we have borderless payments, instantly there's a comeback that says, yes, but you've lost 200 million over the weekend. So how exactly do you think that this is solving something where you do things very quickly and very quickly lose a huge amount of money? So worst case, in my opinion, is that at some point we're just going to be not too big, but we're going to overextend ourselves and forget that it's still crucial that if you want to do something serious, you have to make sure that your bases are really, really covered. So I'm kind of afraid that at some point in this reach to get somewhere else, we're going to forget about this. I mean, we've done this multiple times, and Ethereum has had quite some bugs, but they were always fixed because people cared about them. But we have to be careful not to forget that there's a lot of infrastructure work underneath that has to happen.
Great answer, thanks. I've got the last one, but I think we're running a bit of time, running out of time. Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you very much. Do you want to add something for the audience? You can drop some alphas, the last thing about the topic, about privacy, whatever you want. You've got 1 minute.
Well, we're not a solution in search of a problem. There are problems and they're getting addressed. And I think it's very crucial to see that the things that we're currently developing, maybe each one of us from a different perspective, are not that different. It's not that much of a competition. It's more like using the things that are currently only available to solve problems that were beforehand deemed impossible or improbable. We're going to the moon again in some sense, in multiple ways. But look, you can have somewhat public computation, but still over private data and have this selectively. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I think privacy has been super popular in crypto for 10 years. We've been talking about it from all the different angles, and yet users still don't really care, at the end of the day. And it got me thinking about it quite a lot. I think the problem was we tried to sell privacy as a product, right? So you go to some shitty Forbes article or X and you try to pack up privacy as a product. Well, I personally think it's more a value, and value cannot be addressed post festum. It has to be implemented, or an environment has to push the users to start thinking about the privacy. And right now it feels, world, it is where it is, but it feels that we are at the stage where users are thinking about it. We saw UK introduce digital ID. Next day, Proton has launched information that their VPN service grew for 3,500%. So people are responding, right? Countries are doing something, people are responding, and our narrative, I think, has never been better than it is right now.
I do agree. I do think that people care about privacy. Again, as I said before, to different extents and with different, risk exposure. But I do think that, yes, privacy is a value, and it's a value that we should keep. It's a value that does not necessarily compromise transparency, and does not necessarily compromise information and democratization of data. There is a world in the future in which, and even now, they exist today, where data is private but is also accessible. And I do think that we should keep that in mind as we keep building for the next generation of crypto projects.
Fully agree. I think the aspect that we have to definitely, work on as well is the usability. So really think about the users using the privacy systems more and more. And I think this will be very important to really make it seamless as people are used to interacting. Just put the privacy under the hood and make it much more usable for the general user. And if you want to go to the moon, just a small shell at the end, we'll be for the first time offering a bounty during ETH Prague. So come and join us, build the future and go to the moon together. Thank you.
Great. Big round of applause, please. It was an amazing topic and panelists.